to India Sense. I'm Gauri Dwivedi. Let's start the show with headlines this Friday evening. First up, an anti-establishment mood grips India's neighbourhood after Bangladesh and Pakistan. Sri Lanka is the latest country that is witnessing rising voter resentment due to high living costs and disenchantment with ruling elite. What can New Delhi do in these times? Ahead of the 22nd round of military talks between India and China, reports suggest positive progress on de-escalation and disengagement in the over 4-year standoff between the Himalayan neighbours. Fresh trouble brewing in Pakistan as Pakistan Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif is set to bring a new law to create a federal constitutional court that will supersede the country's Supreme Court. As Sharif tries to shore up the numbers in both houses of parliament, the bill will tame the Pakistani judiciary and end even a modicum of judicial independence. As the conflict in Lebanon deepens, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejects ceasefire plans. Reports suggest Israel is planning for a ground invasion that is set to escalate the crisis in the region. And clamour for India to be given a permanent seat at the United Nations grows. 3 out of the 5 P5 members, that's US, UK and France, back India's bid. On to the big story on the show, the growing anti-establishment trend in India's neighbourhood. Sri Lankans elected Anura Kumara Dissanayake because he represented an anti-establishment choice. This follows what happened in Bangladesh on the 5th of August when Sheikh Hasina's 15-year reign came to an abrupt end. The same script is now playing out in Pakistan with sea of Imran Khan supporters seeking his release. In all these situations, it's the interplay of anti-incumbency with a popular desire for change and economic conditions that disproportionately hurt the poor that was evident. Fractured polity added to the anti-establishment mood. As economic situation remains grim, as in the case of Sri Lanka, Pakistan and Bangladesh, India must brace for volatile electorates as public disenchantment is likely to stay. Before we go ahead, listen in to what Dr. Jaishankar had to say about these grim realities in the neighbourhood.
We were doing it as a good neighbour who did not want to see that kind of economic meltdown at our doorstep. In the case of Bangladesh, I would say it's a little bit different. What we have done over the last, particularly over the last decade, is to do projects of various kinds which have been good for both of us. That, economic activity overall has picked up, logistics of that region has improved, and I think, both countries have gained a lot out of that. So I would urge you not to be deterministic about it. It's not as though India is seeking to control every political move of every neighbor. That's not how it works.
That's just not how it works, actually. India is far bigger than its neighbours. Its neighbouring countries share a border with India, but not with each other. And this is fanning a sense of vulnerability to India's size. India's neighbours are also deeply connected to New Delhi on cultural, religious and civilizational bonds. And as they assert their separate identity as nations, their policies often add to the complexity that is the subcontinent. So what should India do? New Delhi's approach should be to continue the engagement, whether it's on bilateral trade, whether it's on aid or grants, or whether it's the people-to-people connect. As the size of the Indian economy grows to 7 trillion, possibly 10 trillion in coming years, the size of all these engagement options will also grow significantly. But till then, as these smaller neighbours that surround India, they assert their separate identity and position, India will do well to help address the public disenchantment that is the root cause of the anger that we saw in the last couple of months. Shifting focus now to the first wide-angle story on the show, Pakistan's tryst with democracy and constitution. It's been a failed one. Its experiments with electoral framework have always ended with either the popular mandate being stolen or usurped, or worse still, elected prime ministers being behind bars, allowing the Pakistani army to be relevant and at the center of governance and also furthering its anti-India agenda. But what's happening right now in Pakistan could be the very last straw in Pakistan's constitutional framework. Shahbaz Sharif is trying to create a federal court that will sit on top of the Supreme Court of Pakistan, making it redundant. Precipitated by Imran Khan's continued popularity and Shahbaz Sharif's desire to have a pliant judiciary, what he's trying to do along with the army and the entire political class is coming out with a whole host of constitutional amendments. Take a look at this report to know the extent of damage that it could do to Pakistan and its constitution. Imran Khan is popular, and nothing that the Pakistani political establishment does to stop him seems to work. In this year's rigged election, Imran Khan wasn't allowed to contest, and his party was stripped of its symbol too, leading to his members contesting as independents, an order that the Supreme Court later reversed. To ensure there are no more such judicial surprises, Pakistan's political class has come up with the unthinkable, making the country's Supreme Court redundant by creating a federal constitutional court. Known as the Constitutional Package, a legislation is aimed to strip the Supreme Court of its powers to adjudicate on constitutional matters, reducing it to appellate civil and criminal matters. National security issues will not be challenged. The appointment to the FCC will be done by the President and the Prime Minister, and a committee that will effectively end the present collegium system. The age of retirement for Supreme Court justices right now in Pakistan is 65, but for the proposed FCC, the age will be 68. This will mean most judges would like to extend their careers by being on the right side of the government. The legislative delay is only because Shahbaz Sharif is trying to shore up the numbers, since a constitutional amendment requires 2/3 majority, and the ruling alliance is short by 12 in the lower house and 9 in the upper house. But with all political parties united, it's a matter of time before Pakistan's judiciary is tamed. Pakistan's constitution has no sanctity. It barely survives 2 presidential terms. So it's hardly a matter of great surprise, but what's happening here, it means that the army's iron grip over the judiciary will be strengthened further, and Imran Khan's supporters will feel even more cheated than what they felt after the 8th of February election. In both these scenarios, there will be more volatility in a state that is fast-tracking its own descent. Second wide-angle story on the show, Prime Minister Modi's peace efforts in Russia-Ukraine conflict are not just limited to creating a conducive environment for talks to take place or restricted to delivering messages from the other side. It is in fact much more. It is in New Delhi's geostrategic interests that the war ends soon, which is why New Delhi's interests are far more. Before we talk about why it matters for New Delhi that this conflict ends soon, listen in to what Ukrainian President Zelensky said when he said that India must continue to play a role.
There is no separate UN charter for BRICS or for the G7. There is no separate Russian-Iranian UN charter or no separate Chinese-Brazilian UN charter. There is one UN charter which unites everyone, must unite everyone. We have to prepare the second peace summit to end the war altogether. And I invite all of you, all principled nations, to join us in this process, all who truly respect the UN Charter. We invite China, we invite Brazil, I have already invited India, we are working with African nations, with all of Latin America, Middle East, Central Asia, Europe, the Pacific region, North America, all.
So why should this matter to India? Well, the longer this war continues, the more likelihood exists that the Sino-Russian collaboration will only grow. In 2023, the Russia-China trade touched $240 billion. It's set to cross $300 billion this year. China is Russia's largest trading partner. Russia is China's sixth largest trading partner. The share of China's currency in the Russian domestic market has grown from 1% 2 years back to a whopping 30%. It's already the currency of trade. And military experts say that the collaboration between these two countries has in fact extended for making attack drones as well. Of course, Russia needs India, but Russia also needs China. And from an economic and military point of view, the longer the escalation goes on and conflict goes on, the likelihood of this partnership between Russia and China growing closer is much higher, which is why, for its own geopolitical situation and commitments, it is very important for New Delhi to play an active role to ensure that this conflict comes to an end. Now, Prime Minister Modi's visit to the US led to one of the most consequential agreements between the two countries, that is technical collaboration for creating fabs for national security requirements. This is a first for both US and India. It sets the framework for greater tie-ups between New Delhi and Washington. And joining me in this segment is Mukesh Aghi of USISPF to talk about the bilateral relationship and also the US elections, which are now in their last lap. All right, Mr. Aghi, thanks so much for speaking to NDTV. Let me start by asking you about the India-US relationship. It's amidst the tie-up that has been announced between the two countries. It's unprecedented and sets the stage for what else?
So I think you have to look at the our relationship a little broader, and then I'll come down to the specific question on chip side. You have a stress point taking place between US and China. And US has realized that its industrial base in manufacturing is in China, not in the United States. And for it to be able to deal in time of in a time of stress, either war or COVID, for example, it needs to be close to having its own industrial base, or with friendshoring, where it can depend on the supply chain. And so keeping that in mind, you have also India-China relationship, which is at a stress point. So keeping that in mind, US and India realize that they need to work together to deal with the assertive and aggressive China. And US also has realized that its population is aging. It doesn't have the capacity to build a large industrial manufacturing base. So it has decided that it's going to partner with India to build that large industrial base, because the population of India is young. It's a very well-educated population, plus the market demand for products being manufactured in India will grow up, because it's a $4 trillion economy. It'll become a $5 trillion economy. So keeping that in mind, manufacturing chips is a natural progression. That's one of the initiatives. Today, every chip in the world is designed in India because we don't have the fabs, so they're not manufactured. So that's where US has taken the lead. Okay, let's start with the military chip manufacturing so you can supply each other on the defense side itself. So I think you will see not just on that, you're seeing that in GE jet engines now, partnership with HAL to be manufactured. You will see a lot of other areas. So I think the next few years, you'll see a massive deluge of manufacturing moving by the US companies into India.
That's a very important point. And in fact, staying with technology, Prime Minister Modi met the who's who of big tech in the US. Where do you see the tech collaboration going from here on between US and India?
So I think when you look at the track record, government don't run their businesses very effective and efficiently. And that's where the private sector plays a critical role, especially when you're looking at very high-tech manufacturing. So I think you will see effort both by Government of India and US government to bring in private partners. So for example, we're seeing now on the chip side, Tatas are getting involved. You have others getting involved. You look at on the plane manufacturing side, again, Tatas have done partnership with Airbus, with Boeing, with Lockheed. So I think while government will take the initiative, the execution has to come from the private sector.
Right. You mentioned friendshoring at the beginning of this discussion. Donald Trump is promising just that. How much do you think it will have an impact on countries like India if jobs go back to the US?
So I think, if you look at Trump mentioned the same thing when he was the president. Yes, he did impose tariffs on Chinese goods coming in, but who pays for it? It's the consumer. And we already have a inflation in the country we're trying to control. And by putting 60%, 200% tariffs on goods coming in from Mexico or other part, it is going to impact the consumer. And the basically economists are saying that this is not the viable way to build an economy, to build a manufacturing area. So I don't think by putting massive tariff, and we've learned this in India also, by having high barriers, it does not convince the companies to move manufacturing in India. It has to be pull and push strategy, like India has done by setting up PLI scheme to encourage in a positive reinforcement manner for them to set up manufacturing in India. So I think Trump's statements are very political. Past record shows that they were not executed. And I don't see in the future they're getting executed also. So I think India should not worry about from that perspective. It should just continue its momentum and build on what's good for India.
All right, Mr. Aghi, we leave it there. Thanks much for speaking to me on India Sets. Shifting focus. All right, climate change is now not an issue that future generations will have to worry. It's the present generation because it's now a matter of grave concern. The emissions that are being released are now leading to underground fires from locations as disparate as the Arctic to Brazil. And it's the developed nations that cannot shy away from what they have done and must bear responsibility. This report is another grim reminder of the damage that has been done in 200 years of industrialization. Take a look.
This is the Arctic tundra, one of the coldest regions in the world, now home to the worst fire year since 2020. In fact, 8.6 million acres of Arctic tundra have been consumed due to blazes burning across Siberia for months to end. As humanity continues to tinker with the environment, the pushback from Mother Nature is now becoming even more intense. There are now a growing number of underground fires, from Arctic tundra to the peatlands in Indonesia, that move downwards. These emit massive quantities of greenhouse gases, undercutting all efforts to control the climate crisis. Arctic today is getting hotter. In fact, research suggests it's warming faster than any other region on Earth. And the carbon-rich peat under it that protects it from any fire is now drying up fast. In fact, it gets worse. The peat fires increase permafrost thawing, which releases methane, making the Arctic even hotter and continuing this cycle. In the next 2 to 3 decades, scientists say a third of the world's permafrost will disappear due to higher emissions. This could mean everything from present infrastructure like roads, bridges, etc., disappearing to present water bodies like lakes, rivers going underground and creating droughts. If this doesn't set alarm bells ringing, then what will?
All right, on to the quick take segment with crisp editorial views on issues that matter to India. Take a look. By all indications, Israel's conflict with Lebanon is set to escalate. Israel's stated objective is that it wants to ensure return of all its citizens in the north who were forced to move in the wake of Hezbollah's repeated attacks. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced a ground invasion in Lebanon in coming days. Even as diplomatic community scrambles for solutions to prevent an all-out war, Tel Aviv is yet to come out with a clear political strategy. Its operational achievements have been spectacular in recent days, but to convert them into larger political victories requires a plan. At this stage, all Israel can hope for is a tactical escalation followed by a de-escalation on its own terms. Chinese economy got a booster shot from the government as fears loom large that the world's second largest economy may miss its growth target for the second time in 3 years. Chinese central bank announced major monetary policy stimulus like rate cuts, allowing banks to have more cash and bigger incentives for home purchase to kickstart growth. But cheaper money may not be enough to revive consumer spending due to the continued troubles in the property sector and looming job losses due to poor corporate profits. One-time cash handouts by China is a rare admission that its policies have had little impact. But a drastic fall in revenues from land sales have crippled indebted local governments' finances. And for them to invest in growth-boosting projects, the central government needs to do a lot more. Indian equity markets hit record highs this week as Sensex touched the 85,000 mark and Nifty crossed 26,000, both lifetime highs. These were a tribute to the growing equity culture in India, with a rising number of Indians now investing in markets. India is also witnessing large inflow of funds due to the combination of several factors. Fed rate cut has started a cycle of lower rates that will boost spends. Recession fears related to US economy seems to have reduced now, and positive global growth outlook is now a clear factor. As markets grow, some correction is bound to happen, but the trend is clear. India is said to be one of the largest recipients of foreign inflows, and government must do more to ensure that India remains attractive. All right, with that, it's a wrap on this edition of India Sense. Thanks so much for watching.